afternoon. I'm Dianne Smith, and on behalf of the Melbourne Chamber of Commerce, welcome to our fourth COVID-19 webinar for business leaders. And today we focus on the restart and recovery and risk. And we really do trust that these webinars and all of the virtual engagements we've had with you over the past couple of months have provided you with all of the right access and the connections with all of the policy decisions that have been made affecting business. Plus, that you've also been provided with the necessary support and business information and sharing ideas to help you make informed business decisions. So today's session addresses these two topics, advocacy and business information. First of all, we'll be passing soon to Paul Guerra, the Chief Executive of the Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, for an advocacy update, and he'll be sharing what's been going on this past week. And secondly, some member insights on insurance and risk management from Sean Gallagher. And Sean is the head of branches in Australia for the US-based global insurance firm Gallagher. I'll now invite Paul Guerra to summarise the past week. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Dianne. Thanks for having me, and good afternoon, everybody. Great to see you all again, and thank you for joining. So in terms of advocacy, it's been a busy period for us, and hopefully you've seen us pop up in the news even more consistently than what we had over the past fortnight. I had the pleasure, inverted commas, of addressing the Public Accounts and Estimates Committee with the state government yesterday. I'll just run you through that quickly. We gave an overview of where the economy was at, and quite honestly, we know it's a health crisis. It's impacting business and jobs, and it's carnage, which you don't need me to tell you that. Crippled hospitality, events, food service, supply chains being hit, retailers are being hit, apprentice numbers, which I'll talk to in a minute as well, have been dropping significantly, which is a loss of skill set. But there's some positive news around some of the areas, and I know some of you are involved in some good outcomes through this period, which is fabulous, as well as is the construction sector. On the main, though, we're very complimentary of what both the state government and the Victorian government have done, because without those support packages, we would have been in a lot worse position than what we are now. We talked about our involvement with the $500 million support fund, and the ability of us being involved means that we've been able to vary the how people apply for that, but how people qualify for that along the way. So it's been great that the government is listening. Likewise, hopefully you've all benefited from the lack of payroll tax on the JobKeeper component and the work cover premium as well. We were very direct with the state government around that, and I'm glad they've jumped in and modified that there. We talked about a couple of our members, including Griffols, who are doing pretty well through this. Complimented them, 4 Pillars Jen, who you would have seen we did a webinar with, some training providers that have moved to virtual, some event and art gallery businesses that have turned into virtual as well, and the restaurant sector, which I think has pivoted really well into takeaway and delivering in there. So, and whilst they're not all going as well as what they would in normal times, at least they're still operating. We then talked through, and this is a mantra that we're having at the Chamber, is we must define ourselves by our recovery, not by the virus. And that's where we want to start looking at now. Is some of the comments earlier this week, particularly Monday, were around we need certainty. And up until Monday, the Premier's been very good at what I call signposting what is about to happen. And you would have seen that along the way. On Monday, we didn't think he did that and left all businesses in limbo because we didn't know when school was going back. If school doesn't go back, it's very hard to get business to return back to normal. So we went fairly hard on that based on feedback we'd had from the members, and you would have seen us getting picked up by Channel 10, Herald Sun, AFR, and Neil Mitchell on Tuesday as well. So we're pleased to see that. We believe that now gives us a signal to getting on with business, and that relies on you and us doing the right thing from here to make sure that the workplace is going to be safe for people to return to. We want the government to start thinking through what a future Victoria can look like. And we believe an industry, worker, university and government-led recovery plan centred around a bold vision for Victoria is just what we need. We want to be able to look back in 10 years' time and say, Victoria is in a great position because of what we did coming out of COVID. And if I look at our capabilities in health, innovation, manufacturing, ICT, agribusiness, right, they can be leveraged and they can be leveraged again. Right? I don't think we've done enough in health in this state, even though if you look at the Parkville precinct, that is world class. We haven't maximised the capability there. Our view finally is that we think this is going to be a two-stage recovery, three-stage for tourism. And the first stage for tourism is the hyper-local tourism will be first before the state borders drop. For everybody else, it'll be a two-stage recovery process. And that's from now until the vaccine is available, and then from when the vaccine is available and on. And the reason I make that distinction, the health crisis still exists. If we get this phase wrong, people will die. And that's not what we want as the leaders of the community to occur. We've also been lucky enough to have private sessions with Michaelia Cash and Nev Power. I spoke to them in a very small group last Friday. I raised concerns around the apprentice numbers dropping. I raised concerns about international students, particularly for the university sector. We need to find a way to get them back into Victoria as soon as we can. I'm also hearing reports around what the end of September looks like. So I've raised concerns around JobKeeper finishing and nothing substituting JobKeeper, because I do think we're going to be in carnage for a period of time through there. I've also privately spoken to various ministers around the events and hospitality sector. In fact, at the Public Estimates Committee yesterday, I raised that as a major concern, because our reputation as a state relies on our events and our restaurants, bars sector coming back, as well as our cultural pieces coming back as well. And I want to make sure that they stay front of mind, so that when we do get the chance to bounce back, we can. On a slightly negative piece, you may not have picked up, but in the Working for Victoria scheme, which we support, where it's giving people that have lost their jobs an opportunity to work for other organisations, and in some cases the government, there is a clause in there that mandates union officials to be able to come on to your site to interview not only the people that are working under that scheme, but anyone else that they might choose to talk to. Now, we have no issues with unions, and you've seen me stand side by side with Trades Hall, but it should not be mandated and it should not be snuck in. And there will be a letter going to the state government about that on behalf of the employer groups in general, to point out that this is not what we want to see happen. And just finally, we're delighted yesterday by the state's announcement to support the key sectors. And I know many of our members benefited from that yesterday, and we're so pleased to see that come through. Thanks, Dianne. I'm happy to take questions on that later.
Thank you very much, Paul. And we totally appreciate the sort of feedback that you're providing us. And as you can hear from Paul's advocacy report, it's absolutely crucial in the way that we can represent your needs going forward. We also do hear that there's a lot of uncertainty, and we know that you all want to do something positive in terms of contributing to the economic reboot. Many of you have also said to us that you see the crisis as not just an opportunity to consider a business pivot, but also an opportunity to completely rethink your business model or your business strategy. Plus, we know that you're all very concerned about protecting your business and managing risks well. So, hence, having someone like Sean Gallagher here today, who's going to talk about risk management during the COVID crisis, is really, really timely. Now, just a little bit about Sean. He's been in the country for nearly 3 years now. He's the head of branches in Australia for the US global insurance firm Gallagher. As you would recognise, a little bit of a family connection there. And we're absolutely delighted that he's agreed to spend 20 minutes in conversation with Paul. So with that, I'll now invite Paul to start off with the chat.
Thank you, Dianne, and good afternoon, Sean.
How you doing, Paul? Thanks for having me.
I'm very well. It's great to have you here, and we're looking forward to the insights that you'll be able to give us over the next 20 minutes or so. But of course, there'll be an opportunity to connect in with you after this as well, should any member want to do that.
Sure,
I think we might sort of pick up where the coronavirus hit. We're in unusual times. We've been seeing businesses move away from their traditional business models, sometimes because they have the opportunity to, sometimes because they've had to. But what are you hearing and seeing in the wider market about these changes, particularly from an insurance perspective?
Answer your question sort of in two parts, the wider market and then what we're seeing from an insurance perspective. In the wider market, we see an awful lot of businesses being entrepreneurial and creative in ways to sustain their business. So companies are pivoting in ways that I hadn't even really thought of. Cafes and restaurants and things like that pivot to all of a sudden doing delivery services. You could see that, but I've seen companies in the apparel business shifting to making personal protective equipment, masks and things like that, all the way to petrol companies shifting to selling byproducts that go into the hand sanitizer. That they're ethanol and things like that being used in different forms and fashion. So one of the things that crisis like this sort of reinforces the creativity of business and employers. And so I think the advocacy that you're providing to that group is pretty fantastic. From an insurance world perspective, I think it's absolutely paramount that we, as the advisor or the advocate, as I mentioned to you the other day, into the insurance marketplace for our clients, is to understand what's going on with those businesses, so that we can make sure that a business doesn't shift and in doing so expose themselves to some sort of risk that isn't covered by their current insurance, just for the sheer fact of disclosure requirements. So shifting to delivery, for example, you may not necessarily see in a typical cafe or hospitality needing exposure to people driving around on the streets covered, but you do know. And if you don't let your insurance brokers know that, they may not be there. So that creativity is there in both. That's pretty basic. And then there's different ways that the insurance companies are adapting to try to help their customers in need.
Yeah, I'll talk about that innovation in a minute, because I don't think traditionally we would see innovation in insurance, but let me come to that. You've picked up a point here around, a cafe moving to delivery mode, and all that might be a subtle shift. It's still an important shift to talk to the broker about. Where businesses make a larger change, for example, they're pivoting in to make something else. Mm-hmm. Is there a need to engage with their broker?
Absolutely. Insurance brokers should understand the various different revenue streams of their clients and help give you the advice on how to protect that business. Most of the time, in a non-crisis period, you're trying to help them protect while they grow. In a crisis period, we're trying to help you protect that business while you maintain or survive, right? And if you make a shift in the core business to what the insurance companies understand you to be doing in the day-to-day work in the economy, then you expose yourself to exclusions that are in the policy that you may not be aware of, but the broker might be aware of. At the same time, transparency in terms of underwriting information is really key to the insurers being there to do what they do best, which is pay the claims when there is a tough time. And they have to understand what the risk is that they're taking onto their balance sheet in order to be able to best provide that protection. A lot of times, all it takes is a conversation, right? If you go from manufacturing widgets to something that's in the explosives space, then you have a totally different exposure basis. But if you're just shifting a little bit in a similar fashion, it's just about making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, so that your insurance reacts the right way.
Yeah, I know this may be perceived as a negative question, Sean, but I think a lot of us on the call would say, well, actually, as soon as I pick my phone up to my insurance broker or insurance provider, I'm up for a higher premium. Are there examples where actually picking the phone up, particularly in periods where this cash flow is tight, where there may actually be some reductions as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can look to reduce the cash flow of your insurance premium. You can start by, if you pay annually, you can smooth that out and look for an opportunity to take installment billing, right, from the insurance companies. You can you can do premium funding. But I think what you're getting at is the insurance company is going to try to charge me for something. And the insurance companies are set up to transfer risk from clients' balance sheets onto theirs, and they do that for a charge. But there's lots of different ways to tweak it in order to reduce the premium in a time like this. So, for example, if you are in a business that is heavy in motor transport or something like that, where your trucks or your vehicles aren't out on the road as much anymore, a lot of the insurance companies are offering what they're calling laid up cover. So you don't have the exposure anymore to them of driving around and getting into an accident and causing some sort of major liability incident. You just have a piece of equipment that is parked somewhere, hopefully well protected. And so they're offering changes to the cost of that insurance, knowing that really what you're now insuring for is the physical damage of that particular asset rather than the liability that comes with it. Typical.
That's good to know, because I guess innately that's what we would think, but the risk is picking the phone up is that actually it's going to meet with the opposite of it. I guess that brings you to the point. Most of the your peers in the Melbourne Chamber would have their own risk managers or CFO in-house that would ordinarily deal with this. Mm-hmm. Is there an opportunity by them connecting with organisations like yourselves to unpick areas that they may not have thought of?
Yeah, I mean, insurance is a world that in the marketplace, things are changing and adapting all the time. And so some folks that have the ability, and I would say opportunity to have in-house risk departments are in a fantastic position where that is an absolute critical function of any organization. And they can think of all day, every day about what's going on in the organization, but they may not know that yesterday, QBE or Suncorp or IAG were saying no to something, but that changed today. So having an open dialogue all the time allows that risk department to stay on top of the changes of the dynamic in the marketplace, where brokers are constantly in conversation with the insurance companies and frankly advocating on behalf of our clients to get them to do things that maybe they wouldn't have traditionally done, because it's the feedback we're getting from those conversations. So the conversations with folks like us and our peers really help us drive change into the market.
So talk to me a bit more about that. You've had years of experience in this. So there are areas of risk that you see traditionally fall through the cracks and that businesses are currently uncovered for?
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that surprised me when I moved to Australia is that generally speaking across the country, in the smaller end of the mid-market or small enterprise space, lots of business interruption or business income protection isn't purchased. And in my opinion, if you have a piece of property, I wouldn't necessarily buy the property insurance on that tangible asset without the income protection, because most of what your business is deriving the income out of the activity inside that building, right? And so I would say that that's one area that sometimes people think, oh, I can do without it, but then they have a fire or they have something happen and they can't derive the income. So it's something to consider. A lot of times people will say, oh, it's just an additional policy that's being spruiked. And then when they don't have it and they need it, it pops up as something that's a concern. But for me right now, I would say the thing that is probably the most topical is two things. Cyber liability insurance, because the number of attacks are way on the rise. Yeah. So you send everybody home. We're still all working from home, and the number of attacks, because people think that the systems and the infrastructure have been weakened a little bit by the spread, they go up through the roof. And then the other one from working from home is lots of companies have spent an awful lot of time, effort, and resource on designing, OH&S worker-friendly, ergonomic, work environments, and that changes when you go home. The desk that I work at on a daily basis is very different from the desk that I have now been working at on a daily basis in my house. And there are responsibilities of the employer to think about how do you engage with your employees to make sure they're set up appropriately at home.
Yeah. The cyber risk you talk to, there's probably not a day that goes by that we have some kind of email that comes into our systems that fortunately, the virus protector is strong enough to pick it up. But we are hearing almost every day around that cyber risk. How significant are you seeing it? And then is there an insurance product that will actually cover that to the point that a business needs?
Yeah, so cyber insurance should look to cover that. It's probably developed in the last 10 years or so. And I would say 5 years ago, it might have been at the same level where employment practices and liability insurance was 20 years ago. Especially with private companies or private organizations where they thought, we're like a family, nothing's going to go wrong, and then incidents pop up. But yeah, attacks are very much on the rise, even to the point where I got an email the other day from something that said my boss's name on it, and the contents of the email didn't really make any sense. So I took a screenshot of it and sent it to her and said, "Hey, Sarah, I don't think this came from you, but just making sure." Now, I know her personal email address too, so that didn't match up. But if you're in a rush, you're in a hurry, all it was asking me to do was respond. Yeah. And when I then joined a conference like this with her on it, and I was probably the 15th or 20th person that had gotten that email. But so they're just trying lots of different ways, and having a cyber policy can help protect you from a lot of different things.
Yeah, my CFO got asked to spend $70,000 on a sports utility for me last week, so it's there almost every single day, and it's a concern because once they get in, they get in. Yeah. In terms of people listening to the webinar, how do they go about just checking that they have got the right insurance? Is it just a simple call to their risk manager or their broker on the other side?
Yeah, you can pick up the phone and call your risk manager, your insurance broker, and have a conversation. I mean, I think I would say that the number one thing that is critical in a time like this is transparency and getting out ahead of what you're thinking about doing with your insurance partner, right? And there's plenty of our competitors in our business, and so I think that there's lots of people that would be willing to give you advice in all of Victoria and all of Australia, and pick up the phone and call somebody you know and ask them a couple of questions and just make sure that what you're thinking about doing is appropriate for the coverage you have, or maybe you need to make a tweak to reduce some costs somewhere, so that you can explore that other avenue as well.
So am I right in saying you see this as one of the key partnerships for business? If you can have the right conversation and relationship with the broker or insurance provider, you're going to be much better off.
Yeah, I mean, in my personal opinion, an insurance broker should be there to give you advice and consultation and advocacy into the insurance marketplace while understanding your business and helping you protect it. And what I mean by that is not necessarily that you need to buy insurance for everything. You need to make well-informed decisions on what to buy and what not to buy. My risk appetite is, personally fairly low. I buy insurance on a lot of stuff because that's the way that for my personal, family things, I'd rather be protected. But if you're trying to find a new way to open up, a business line in a situation like this, you might be willing to take a little bit of risk. So you might be able to take retentions or decide that you don't need a particular coverage that applied to a different business that's not really there anymore, right?
Yeah.
So you just got to have the conversation and think of and have your broker do a cost benefit analysis for you, and then you make the decision that's right for you and your business.
That's good. And last one before I get to some personal stuff with you. We've seen different companies innovate through this. You're sitting in the key part of the economy to keep us going. What are you doing from an innovation perspective?
What are we doing from an innovation perspective? Well, I think that we are being forced all the time to innovate on behalf of our clients and potential clients. One of the things that I think we are trying to do as a business here in Australia and around the world is use data and information in order to help people make better informed decisions. So looking at ways to benchmark, looking at ways to understand why is my insurance at this level, or what are the risks that are out there that can help me think about my business. But we are always looking at ways to improve the experience of our customers. And so, insurance premium to a certain extent is the most tangible thing, but a lot of it's about the other ways that you can tweak and move that insurance program to basically essentially bubble wrap your organization at a cost-effective rate. And from time to time, there are ways that you can do it. One thing that I've seen is in different parts of the world that isn't as much of an option for the non-huge corporations is different forms of essentially risk financing, right? And so maybe over time some of that stuff will open up from a government perspective, but if we're not constantly getting better for our customers, or our peers, our competitors aren't constantly getting better, somebody else is thinking about it. It's a big market. There's lots of us that would love to do the consultative work that I'm talking about with lots of different companies. And so we have to be on our toes all the time.
That's great. I love history of organisations, but I love the romance of where there is a definitive connection. Your surname Gallagher, the company's name Gallagher. There's got to be a link in there somewhere.
It's not a coincidence, right? Our parent company's name is Arthur J. Gallagher and Company, and I'm a fourth generation. So he started his business in 1927, right before the Great Depression in Chicago. And so he went off on his own in a tough time and fought his way through the Depression. And then his sons, my grandfather and his brothers, kind of started to take it to another level through some of that innovation stuff that you're talking about. Yeah. My grandfather invented a way for schools, dioceses, and councils of the like in the U.S. to buy insurance on scale using reinsurance and funding. And he developed a program that had a risk-taking component in the U.S.
Yeah.
And that risk-taking component included the need to actually manage and pay claims, which produced a company called Gallagher Bassett. And Gallagher Bassett was actually our first entree into Australia about 23 or 24 years ago. And we've got an office, a nice office in Collins Street. The CEO is a guy named John McNamara. He's here in Melbourne, but we do a lot of the claims management business for lots of the governments around the country in Australia. And over time, we built up our business in Australia, and I got an opportunity to move here, and I've loved living here and working here.
So you're the first of the Gallagher chain to come into Australia?
No, to work, yes.
Yeah.
My brother studied at Monash for a semester with his girlfriend at the time, who was now his wife. And so they were my first introduction to Melbourne and Australia in general.
Yeah, I've often likened as Sydney would be to New York, Melbourne is to Chicago. I reckon the similarities between the two cities with the Irish-Italian influence, the big river that flows through of a different colour. The features are more cultural and cuisine, and particularly jazz in Chicago, as it is with Melbourne in that. So there's a good synergy from where you come from and where we are.
And there's lots of Greek people here as well, and Chicago has a sizable Greek population. And I'm married to a Greek girl who I promised would never move any place that didn't have an Orthodox church. And so when I Googled Greek churches in Melbourne, I was surprised to see how many there were, and then I started to learn a lot more about the culture and the different dynamics of Melbourne. There's an awful lot of similarities in that analogy.
There'll be one or two people on the call that'll correct me, but I'm pretty sure Melbourne is the largest population of Greeks outside of Greece of any city in the world. So
yeah, it is. And when I take my mother-in-law out to dinner in Oakley the next time she can come in, she only speaks Greek to everybody else, but she speaks English to me because I don't understand anything.
No, that's great. Now, Sean, if people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that? We'll obviously provide the details afterwards to anyone can they come to you and have a chat?
Yeah. Give me a call. Shoot me an email. Happy to chat with anybody. If I don't know the answer, somebody in our organization will, and I'll help you get the answer.
It's been great. Thanks so much for your insights, and we look forward to staying connected.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand back to you to see if there's any questions.
Thanks very much, Paul. There's a question from me, actually. Sean, last time we spoke, I'm pretty sure your brother Brendan might run the New York office. Now, the conversations that you two must be having would be incredibly different when you observe how different the different offices and the different countries are responding to the crisis. Can you share a little bit about that in terms of your observations about just running a business here and compare with what your brother is dealing with, or what your colleagues in New York are dealing with?
Yeah, on a personal level, my sister also lives in Manhattan as well.
Oh, wow.
And she hasn't been there since this whole thing broke out. She was supposed to come visit me and canceled the trip because it wasn't sure what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And she's since been living with my parents. My brother Brendan lives in a town that's essentially the epicenter of the suburban outbreak in New York. So he's been at home and locked down for a while. And his office is right next to Grand Central Station. And the reason I point that out is one of the major challenges that he is facing is the fact that everybody's now gone to work from home, and we had provided flexible working environments and things like that. But lots of people in New York commute 2 hours, right? Mm-hmm. And some of the people on this call who have employees in regional towns that take the train in to Melbourne may be in a similar situation. That may be fairly unattractive to people going forward. So it's trying to find a way to engage and keep engaged the best people on his team, because they're critical to the business. People drive the business, and you got to keep the brains in a brain business. So he's trying and looking for unique ways to stay engaged with the people that are spread out all across the New York metropolitan area, who had been commuting in to keep his business thriving. He's also seen an awful lot of opportunities out of it. So, it's tough there right now. But they're finding interesting, creative ways to engage their employees and their clients. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. It's really interesting getting that global perspective, and it makes us very thankful. I noticed we do have Monash University on the line today, so that's a ringing endorsement of the global connections that you and your family and this city and New York has. Gentlemen and everyone, I think we might bring this to a close, because I think there's been some really great insights, and I know that Sean has offered to answer any questions subsequent to the webinar, but I think you've comprehensively covered everything that we really wanted to know. So thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much, Sean, for that great chat that we could share with everyone else.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just in closing, I do want to just say how pleased we are to have Gallagher as part of the membership group of the MCC. In particular, we work very closely with Paul O'Brien and Richard Haig, and thank you to those two gentlemen for helping us set this up, and of course to our team at the MCC, in particular Troy Wood and Dianne Darman. There's just one last reminder for those of you, and I know everyone is really thinking seriously about how you're going to reopen your workplaces safely. The Victorian Chamber team does have some really good tools to assist you with that. And you may have seen us distribute a COVID-19 business restart guide. As a Melbourne Chamber member, you have free access to that guide, and you can use it as a template and make it your own. And it's to work in a complementary fashion to the checklist, which is, of course, on the website. So we'll continue our work, and you heard what Paul's been up to just in this past week. I can assure you it's all, everyone is working really hard here on behalf of the business community. We want to get Victorians back to work safely. We want to see the economy reboot. We know all of you as our members want to be part of that solution, and it's been fantastic this week to see that schools are gradually coming back. And in our wrap email, I'd like to share with you a beautiful post that we saw from one of our members, Wesley College, where they had their whole orchestra playing together in sync, in harmony, and it was all online and done remotely from various remote learning environments. So we'd like to share that with you just to bring a bit of a smile to your face. But we do look forward to staying in touch with you throughout this challenge. We have several webinars coming up, and some of these include Greg Hunt next week on the 19th of May, Anthony Albanese on the 26th of May, and the Lord Mayor Sally Capp on June the 3rd. And that's not all that's happening here. So please stay in touch with us. We will send out all the information about how to register for the forthcoming webinars. So until next time, good afternoon from all of us here, and have a great rest of the day.